Welcome to the Greatest Pod, where we discuss and debate what makes something great. I'm Ron Swallow.
I'm Ed Greer.
And I am producer Bill.
And Bill, we were discussing how we wanted to talk about this specific subject, and I think you came up with a very succinct and solid way to say it, so I'm going to pass it over to you. What are we talking about today?
The next great genre boom. And what I mean by that is if you look at the past 50 years of cinema history, right? The 70s were the golden age of crime stories. The 80s were the golden age of sort of muscled dudes with guns, sort of beefcake shoot 'em up action movies. The 90s, the golden age of family-friendly special effects spectacles. And then obviously we all know from the 2000s until now has been the golden age of superheroes on screen. So once superheroes die down, which we've been saying they're going to for the past 15 years and they have not yet abated, but eventually it'll happen. I want us to use our prognostication skills. I want us to blue sky this a little bit and try to come up with what will overtake superheroes if and when that happens. And I think it's a twisty conversation because mixed up with that is sort of the changing face of media, right? Like from the 70s, and I mean, you can go back even further to the 60s and the 50s, but I think the further back you go, sort of the less relevant it becomes. But from like the 70s through now, or call it from the 70s through 2010, right? Media was media. And, you know, the home video market exploded and that turned into DVDs, which eventually turned into digital. And that was all kind of well and good. But round about 2008, 2009, that's when we started getting YouTube and streaming services and tech companies entering the content market, and sort of the way we defined celebrity completely changed. Whether you want to attribute that to YouTube or reality television or whatever, like the world changed. And into that changed world, I think the one constant we sort of held on to in our entertainment was superheroes as sort of this dominant blockbuster genre. So what happens when it isn't? That's my question for us today. What does that look like? Where's that going to come from? Why might that happen? And what will replace it?
I mean, I can tell you what I hope.
Okay.
And that is clearly fantasy. No, I'm just kidding. Sci-fi is what I think, is what I hope it will be. Good, but like good sci-fi. Like the kind of sci-fi. But my problem with that, look, I'm saying that because I think that would be rad, because I think sci-fi does a great job making things interesting and fantastic and a spectacle, but also great sci-fi is always asking fundamental questions and trying to answer, you know, big ideas, I think. The best sci-fi. And so I would love that to happen. But I also see one problem with that immediately, and that's it's hard to make franchises out of that. And I'm not sure because the boom is going to be franchises, right?
I don't know, but you're asking a lot of questions. Let's talk about the sci-fi thing for a second, because I think that's interesting. And I would make a counter argument that the 90s already kind of gave us a sci-fi boom in an abstract sense.
That's true.
There wasn't a lot of tonal similarity, but if you look at the 90s, you have everything from Terminator 2 Judgment Day to Jurassic Park to The Matrix, and a lot of stuff in between, all of which were like the biggest movies of the era. And they were all technically sci-fi. They weren't as cohesive as the idea of like superheroes, which I think even in and of itself is kind of sci-fi. So I think maybe we need to get a little bit more granular.
Okay.
The other issue that you bring up, though, will it be franchises? I don't know, but it's an interesting question. And I'll just say this from boots on the ground of producing right now, the only thing anybody's interested in at all is franchises. That idea of like, oh, we're going to get 4 movies and 3 TV shows and a shit ton of merchandise, and we might even make a theme park ride. Like, if you don't got that, it's very hard to get big money behind you. I don't know how long that will last, because I think the one danger, even more than audiences getting tired of superheroes, is the idea of money people getting tired of being burned on investing the money it takes to build a franchise and not seeing the returns that, say, Disney does. That's a
Yeah.
very real possibility.
Okay, can I jump in here real quick to say I don't understand why people don't understand that every single franchise that ever happened was an accident. I repeat, every single franchise that ever happened was an accident. Every single human being that's ever made a burger joint that becomes McDonald's, they were just trying to make one burger joint. They were trying to make one good restaurant. And it ballooned in this way because they had a super dope process that Ray Kroc could see being applied all over the continental United States, and that's why it's a franchise. But at first, anybody who sets out to be McDonald's will never be McDonald's, if you understand what I'm saying. So it's
Yeah.
like it just
That's
bothers me
interesting.
that we think we can, Jurassic Park out of the amber re-engineer the franchise formula. It's preposterous. Star Wars was one movie that they let die on the beaches of the theater, and it was like, I win. I win. You know what I'm saying? I win because I'm so good. And they make more of me because I'm so good. That's how it happened, not some intricate calculation. That just bothers me.
I think you're right
Rightfully
in some
so.
ways. Yeah. I mean, I saw a recent interview with Kevin Feige who literally said, when we put out Iron Man, we didn't know what would happen. It was either going to be a success and we were going to do what we've done, or it was going to fail and we would have no movies. That would be the end of it. Like, Iron Man was like make or break for them. And if it hadn't worked, we would literally not have 18 years, almost 20 years of not 18 years, 11 years, whatever it is at this point. When did Iron Man come out? 2008?
2008.
Yeah. So either way, you get the idea. We wouldn't have what we have today if Iron Man hadn't worked.
Okay, but real
And
quick.
it was an accident.
Yeah, but real quick, I got to quibble with that because you telling me they got all the rest of my P's and Robert Downey Jr. fresh out the joint don't work. So what did they introduce in that first Iron Man? Stupid eye patch man comes out. Hey, I'm Nick Fury. I got an initiative. Get that out of here. They did it inside of Incredible Hulk and it didn't work and nobody remembered. Nobody cared. Iron Man showed up at the end of Incredible Hulk. A whole ass Iron Man showed up in that movie and nobody cared. You know what I'm saying? So like that's the part that bothers me. Is like it worked because it worked. And the degree to which it worked meant they could do franchises. But literally nothing is make or break. And I would hope that in a just future, people would just go back to the old model. Try to make a movie the best you can and make the most money you can make off of it. And if it makes outsized, if it costs $37 million and it makes $1 billion, then yeah, talk to the guy about a sequel. I'm sure he'll come up with an idea. I'm sure.
You know what's so weird to me? And again, these are conversations that I've had with people over the past 5 years or so. I was sure that the success of Blumhouse would lead to a real explosion of sort of more small, contained, focused mini studios that are trying to do exactly what you're talking about, Ed. And to the man, like every manager or studio person I've ever talked to has been like, well, Jason Blum figured out a thing that like only he knows how to do, and like they do it really well. And yet all of those same people will turn around and be like, how can we spend $1 billion to do the next Avengers? It's so weird.
Dude, and check it out. Apple is trying to buy A24. Do you know why? Because when they say A24, I think I saw it on Twitter. This lady was like, "Yo, my son said he's going to go to the Metroplex and see the new A24 movie." He didn't even say a title. He said, "I'm going to see the new A24 movie." That's how much of a brand recognition for people who like that sort of movie, the sort of low budget, sort of ennui packed movie. They know where to get it. And Apple wants to buy the motherfucker. That's how powerful that brand is. So that's crazy. Only Blum knows how to do it. Get the fuck out of here.
Well, also though, snake eating its own tail on this whole conversation. The reason Apple's looking to do that is because they tried to build their own content studio and did a miserable job of it. I mean, there's some decent stuff on Apple Plus, but like their management and their strategy is awful. They're just burning money, not recouping, making stuff that's very middle of the road. Like they're finding their footing, but all the first seasons of all those Apple Plus shows were very iffy. And so now it's like they are looking to, oh man, how can we better Hollywoodize ourselves? Because we thought we were going to be Mavericks about this and it didn't work too well. And so maybe that's it. I do know that one of the big things about this is circa the early 2000s, private equity money started flooding into Hollywood. And before that, the studios essentially operated like investment banks. So it's like the big money in Hollywood was controlled by the studios and the studio heads. Now, with private equity, you've got hedge funds and Wall Street guys and tech investors and all that looking at like, well, how can we dump money into entertainment products and make a tenfold return? Because that's all private equity ever wants to do. They want to beat the market. So they got to look for anything they can find where it's like, oh, the S&P 500 is going to give you a 4% return this year. We're going to make 15, and all of our investors are going to want to blow us for it. Like that's their whole game. And so you can do that in entertainment. It's not guaranteed, but it's a lot easier to do it investing in entertainment than it is investing in, products made in a Chinese factory somewhere. So now there's all this sort of funny money that's coming in of people who don't really care about the art value. Say what you will about the old studio mogul system, it still was staffed by people whose vision and business was movies. That's not really the case now with the people who are running things. Studio heads now we still have studio heads, but they are answering to a whole nother suite of people who are controlling vast amounts more money. People like the guys who formed Legendary Pictures, which are they bankroll all the biggest movies, all the Monsterverse movies, all the early DCEU movies. And those guys are 100% Wall Street hedge fund guys. And like all they're looking for are mega hits. And so from that comes this strategy of like, let's franchise everything because that's how we make $1 billion turn into $2 billion. I don't know when that model will break, but that's a whole other piece to this conversation.
Interesting. So we've got a financial piece, and then we've got what people like piece. We have to argue that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, let's jump on that. I watched the movie Infinite on Paramount Plus. That sentence is loaded with things about this conversation, right?
Yep.
So like I was sitting on my ass at home and I watched a big budget Antoine Fuqua directed actioner that cost at least $130 million to make. Just judging by my eye, being able to see these things, about 130. And if I think it's 130, it was probably 170, bro. Cause and it didn't look it either on that weird level. You know what I mean? Yep. So it's like, ugh. Anyway, so I'm watching it. Long story boring. My girlfriend makes the most astute comment about the whole thing. And the story has a guy with a sword fighting an immortal guy, and there's been immortal guys and people, not immortal guys, but people who can remember every life they've had for all their reincarnations. So they have all the skills of all the infinite people that have died as their ancestors to make them. So you can be a master swordsman, blacksmith, horse rider, gunfighter, all because you had all those different lives, so you can remember all those skills. On the outset, it's kind of cool. The butchering they make of that concept, the lore laden, just Billy from our show Rebooted's eyes would glaze over in 2 seconds watching this movie. There are several scenes of basically like any scene in Harry Potter where somebody talks for 5 minutes explaining magic. There's 6 or 7 of them. The scene where like Morpheus tells Neo what's what. There's 5 or 6 of them in this movie over and over because they keep compounding the thing with new concepts. So all that to say, it was a pile of mumbo gumbo. There were too many competing ideologies. There was the guys who got killed with the special guns. Souls were hidden on a hard drive so they couldn't reincarnate. Yeah, you heard that sentence right. You heard that sentence exactly right. So that's all I'm saying is my girl goes, if Mark Wahlberg wanted to do some Marvel superhero stuff, he should have got his ass in one of them movies. And it's interesting because that cut right through all the bullshit that I just said. They're trying to shove 5 comic book concepts up the ass turducken style of this Matrix ripoff and call it the new way we do movies. And it failed utterly. So at least we can understand that the chattering masses didn't fall for that. But maybe they just didn't see it because it was on Paramount Plus. Maybe if it came out in a righteous way in movie theaters, we would have signed up to see this crap.
I don't know. I mean, I think you're hitting on something that goes to what Ron was saying about sci-fi earlier. I think the one thing that will always tank, these big budget spectacles are when they try to lure you to death. And there are definitely things that have skirted that line. Like The Matrix was a huge smash hit and they had a lot of shit explained, but it was done so artfully and so tactfully. You know what I mean? The Lord of the Rings movies the same way. Like there's a reason that the Lord of the Rings movies were as successful as they were, and yet did not spawn a golden age of fantasy in cinema. Because I think, a general audience is never going to want to have to wade through the morass of lore. And I think superheroes, as much as they take full advantage of where we are currently with like special effects technology, they also live in this beautiful sweet spot of having just enough sort of continuing extended story to make an audience feel like, ooh, I get this. I'm on the inside track, without making them do any real work, without making them do any real, like, wait, what did that guy say about the thing with the what? Huh? You know what I mean? Like, you got to find that middle ground. And I think if you look at all the best sort of dominant genres over the years, from musicals to westerns to horror to crime to Schwarzenegger style action to Spielberg style action, all of those movies all those movie styles, those movie genres, they're very pulpy. They're very like, you get what you need in this one serving. Don't worry about wading through a world that's super weird to you. Like, well, we got you. You know what I mean? And so whatever's next I think it has to fit that rule, maybe more than ever, because audiences are paying less attention than ever. So
yeah, I mean, I would say, especially if we're talking about movies specifically here, and which I think is what we're doing, because TV, you can get away with a ton of lore because they're going to watch for 5 seasons.
For you though, they can, but Supernatural lasted 15 seasons, whatever. It didn't change. It didn't dominate the landscape. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and honestly, there's not as much lore as you think there is in that. It's all pretty simple. It's like, sure, there's this, there's that, but it's like explained in a few sentences every episode, pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's not like a ton of lore. Like there's a ton of lore, you could argue, but it's not like it takes up time in what they're doing. It's 2 sentences. Like, I look at my dad's journal and it looks like we're hunting a Wendigo. Those guys who ate human beings and then got superpowers from it, and that's it. Oh, how do you kill it? Well, you got to get a stake that does this. That's it. That's.
And that was always the rule when we were producing paranormal reality shows, right? Hunting for monsters or whatever. Like you never wanted to use a concept so esoteric that the audience didn't already know about it, right? Like there's a lot of great sort of cultural monsters. If you go to some island in Indonesia and they believe in this specific, dragon snake thing, but it's like, no, we're never going to do an episode about that. Or if we are, it's going to be stuck in the middle of a season that gets middling ratings, and we already know it's going to get middling ratings because, again, you're asking the audience to do too much work. A Wendigo, I've probably encountered at least the word somewhere along my travels in life if I live in North America. Bigfoot, there's a reason Bigfoot is the biggest genre hit as far as reality paranormal. Like the familiarity of the audience with the world and the characters and the concepts is important when you're trying to do these big sort of sweeping things. So I don't know. Like I thought for a minute, I'll just say this. I thought for a minute that there was going to be a huge swing toward outer space movies. I felt like that was the next logical thing to take advantage of modern special effects. And you saw a soft stretch with like Gravity, Interstellar, and a few sort of lesser, not imitators, but lesser similar movies in that time period. But it kind of came and went. It was like 3-4 years we sort of had an uptick in space movies, but they didn't stick around.
I'd put Ad Astra in there too, even though it just came out.
First Man, the Neil Armstrong movie, that would go in there. There's a couple of them.
Well, I think what's interesting about that is what was the main thing about those was how much verisimilitude can we use to show what space is? How can we one up Apollo 13 in every way we possibly can. Like Gravity was like, Apollo 13, suck my balls off the top rope. Yeah! You know what I mean? They were trying so hard to show that, oh, this is space. We took Sandy Bullock up in space. We just let her float around. You know, you know what I mean? So I think that's part of it. And I don't think people, after they've seen Iron Man fly in space unaided and Spider-Man drop into lower orbit, watching Neil Armstrong do it unfortunately doesn't do it for him on some level. Like I was watching Ad Astra, and the only part that was a good part of that movie, no spoilers because it's the best part, you should watch this part. They go to the moon and there's like hijackers on the moon. There's like people who live in outcroppings and they come into the city, and as if they see you going from point to point and in those unpoliced badlands areas of the moon, they'll descend on you Mad Max style with the big helmets on and stuff and steal your stuff. That was awesome. That's a movie.
Yeah.
Just show me that movie. It was like 10 minutes of Ad Astra. I was like, what are you doing? Show me the space. Show me the Moon Pirate movie, man.
Moon Pirates. Love that.
That's going to be the next genre. Moon Pirate.
You mentioned Mad Max, and I think it is worth noting that like immediately preceding the superhero boom, with some overlap, you know, I think the big genre in Hollywood was essentially young adult coming of age, you know, epics. Everything from Harry Potter to the Divergent series to the Hunger Games, you know, and a ton of lesser imitators. And so that kind of came and went. And then it, you know, around about 2010, 2008 to 2012, somewhere in there, the pendulum just swung fully toward Marvel style superheroics. So I would argue that genre also kind of fits what we're talking about. It is a little more lore heavy, but if you look at the ones that succeed, they succeed because they sort of, you know, push the lore to the side in favor of action and very relatable motivations and consequences.
The woods and all my friends started disappearing. I got to document it. And there's a YouTuber in the woods while other YouTubers or other TikTokers are getting murdered, and they're all getting and we only see the movie happen through their TikToks and their updates on the different apps. That's how the movie happens. And that's obviously somebody's screaming at their television or whatever that they already did that in some movie. I didn't see it, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, one of the things that I think is interesting too is that you're starting to see way more sort of TikTok and Instagram famous people showing up in, you know, it's not like they've got a main role in a Marvel movie, but showing up in movies that are more geared towards kids, in sort of supporting roles in big movies, kind of more successfully than the YouTube crowd ever did. Like, you know, 10 years ago, a lot of studios were trying to figure out like, oh man, how do we take these top YouTubers or top Viners, back when Vine was a thing, and put them in movies so that we can grab that audience. And the audience just didn't follow at all. I still think they're not really moving en masse, but I think there's been a little bit more success with taking some of your top people and translating them to either television or movies or streaming, more conventional style entertainment products. So I don't know. I wonder if something breaks through that way.
I mean, what if movies just kind of stop being a thing? Like, because theaters are like, you know, I mean, look, guys, we're having this conversation and it's great. And in 20 years, literally people could just be burning from the sun. And I'm not trying to be super dark, but like it was 108 in Canada. In Canada. I mean, like we may be talking about a thing that's fun to talk about, but like maybe the next genre is gonna be apocalyptic movies.
Disaster movies make a comeback?
Yeah, like, but not even just disaster movies, but like people are trying to survive on a mostly dead Earth.
I mean, I would, but that I think you're hitting on something here. I think we did that. I think that was the last 40 damn years. Every single thing was so post-apocalyptic. We've been about the post-apocalypse and the world after the apocalypse being a desert, arid place for 40 years now. How far
Yep.
does Mad Max go back? How far does a lot of these things that are supposed to represent, our barren Earth? Damn, what's his name? Charlton Heston, the Omega Man. You know what I'm saying? We've been obsessed with the post-apocalypse forever. Freaking Planet of the Apes. That's the apocalypse, technically. So all I'm saying is I know what's coming next, and I hate that we came upon it at the halfway point because I'm just right. What's gonna come is I think I heard about it on Twitter. It's utopian science fiction. I shit you not.
Solar punk.
Solar punk. Solar punk is going to come in a huge way. And I'll tell you, dude, we're going to be up to our chests in glacier water, but we're going to be inside the movie theater anyway, because it's going to be one of the only places that's still cool. Watching solar punk, watching people from the futures with microchips under their skin flying around of their own accord in a future that's wonderful and everybody gets to do whatever the fuck they want. That's going to be a popular movie while we're down here drowning and dying. Because the movies are escapist. In the middle of the Depression, the movies made money. How the fuck? You can't buy bread, but you can go to see the movies, you freaks? You know what I mean? We're that escapist. We're that obsessed with it. So that's what I would argue, that the worse it gets here, I think the more aspirant our entertainment will actually get.
The more positive and lack of story.
I mean, look. That. Go ahead.
I mean, I guess the whole story will be someone who's trying to ruin utopia, and you have to stop the guy who's trying to ruin utopia, I guess,
Yeah, I mean, listen, Warren Ellis, who is a problematic guy who's been canceled, but one of the things I've always loved about his work is that he, for 25 years, has, and by the way, comics are always 10 to 15 years ahead of where the rest of pop culture is. So that's probably a worthwhile thing for us to look at too. And Warren Ellis, who's been one of the leading voices in comics since the year 2000, has always written stories where the good guys are explicitly progressive and the bad guys are all explicitly regressive. All those stories are about heroes who are trying to sustain a utopian-ish world and bad guys who are trying to bring all the old prejudices and problems of the past to tear down that utopia. And it's not something that's really permeated. I think there's hints of it in a lot of the MCU products.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see us going that way. I think that is interesting, Ed.
That is interesting.
I think it's going to be part of it, is all I'm saying. I think it's going to be part of it.
And I think another part of it that's, because this is a thing that's very popular, at least on streaming right now, and I think it's also good, is that they're having lots of LGBTQ, et cetera, people just being normal people on there, where it's not part of the story per se. It's just they're gay and they're in a movie doing a thing. And no one is, the story's not about them being gay. It's just that they are gay, and that's no big deal. And everybody just does it and doesn't care.
There's a lot of slice of life representation across streaming services that does seem to sort of become its own burgeoning genre.
Yeah. Well, and it's also brilliant because those stories are cheap.
Yeah.
If you're willing to shoot them and not be a dick about it, you'll make your money back because they're cheap.
Yeah, no, I think that's very astute. I mean, it's interesting too, because you also see that creeping into all these big tentpole superhero movies. Marvel's been very sort of open about it, and I think for the better. But the idea of let's take this formula that we have perfected, arguably, and let's see how it looks when you put different cultures and ethnicities and races and types of people into those stories. And so I mean, I do think, honestly, we're kind of living through that right now. Maybe we're looking right past the thing that's in front of our noses. Like, that is sort of the hot ticket in Hollywood right now, is just, authentic representation.
Well, I think though that I think the problem with it being called like a genre is that that's almost as exclusionary as anything on some level. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's like they used to call it ghettoizing, and meaning in the old school term of ghetto to segregate into other section, period. So it is interesting though,
it's like gay ploy station, Gays exploitation.
Dude, Salt Bay couldn't have butchered that better, baby.
I couldn't
But-
figure out how to say it. Gay exploitation. Gay exploitation.
You still can't.
I can't do
it. No, what I'm saying is though, this representation is going to be inside all of movies. So if indeed we are a society where, maybe in 15 years, the villain of a movie is a gay woman, and it's not part of why she's a villain. She doesn't have a strike against men. She's just a gay, powerful super villain. You know what I mean? That's where you know stuff is actually really progressive. Like when I see, it's getting to the point where I've seen like black villains in movies and didn't think about it at all. One point of fact, probably whenever Baron Mordo shows up to menace Stephen Strange in the Marvel movies, and they use that actor whose name is
Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Boom. He is in Infinite as the bad guy. And I never once thought any making the brother the bad guy, because he was just a weird action movie bad guy. You know what I'm saying? So like that sort of representation is seeping in presently, and I'm very happy for it. But beyond that, okay, so what type of movies are they going to be in? We got Solar Punk. I think also another one is I got to a flame war with a guy on the internet. And I hate that I did that, because I was just trying to say that Black Widow isn't more shallow or more unbelievable than any other Marvel product, really. And it's in the middle of the pack, or for some people near the top of the pack of that sort of stuff. And I was just like, that's what it is. Like that's what I think of it. And I think a lot of people who are just like, it's so unbelievable she did that, or unbelievable she did that. It's just like, if you think John Wick or Batman or any of these people are believable and Black Widow isn't, you're some asshole. I kind of said that on Twitter. A guy really took umbrage because he really didn't like the movie, and he was really thinking it was so inferior to other Marvel products. So of course we have an opinion off. And long story boring, what was interesting about it was he kept bringing up the Fast and the Furious movies for some reason. The Fast and the Furious movies jumped into the conversation, like the General Lee over Justice or whatever, and jumped into the conversation. And I was thinking he was conflating the stuff that Black Widow is able to accomplish in a spy movie that's like superhero action, and the fact that inside the Fast movies, they do, frankly, superheroic actions all the time, and that we're becoming a society that won't have any more John McClane's picking glass out of his feet. Gino Toretto has glass in his eyeballs, and he'll still fight you for 20 reels. You know what I mean? So all that to say, I think the very next genre is, hey, bro, I'm a scientist. Oh, dudes are busted in here. I'm just going to karate chop them and kick them 57 feet out the window for no reason. I think that's going to be a genre in between where we're just like, nobody cares why people are doing superheroic action. Just give it to me. Because the Fast and Furious movies are basically saying, I want people to throw each other 50 feet. I want people to jump from hard ass steel moving object to other hard ass steel moving object, moving in opposite directions at 500 miles an hour and not get hurt. I just want to see that. And I don't care about the physics. I don't care about your nerd bullshit. Put your glasses up and shut the fuck up. I just want to see it. I don't want no lore reason why they can do it. Gino Toretto isn't a super soldier. He didn't get bit by a radioactive hammer. None of that bullshit happened to him. He's just super. And all his buddies are super. Fuck you. And those movies are brilliantly successful. Brilliantly successful.
Yes.
Well stated.
Not
well
brilliant per se, but brilliantly successful.
Brilliantly successful.
Sure.
But they also did something. They just decided that that's what they were going to do. They embraced the ridiculous and were like, let's just, at each time, we'll make it more ridiculous. Let's just make it as ridiculous as possible. And then also have everyone talk about being family all the time. The theme is family. The vehicle is shooting into outer space. Like that's what they did.
But again,
that's
of
fine.
course, but of course people have made those points. But what I'm saying is it is super freaking diverse.
Yeah.
Superhero action with no lore.
Yep.
Zero lore.
None.
You have to know zero. So they've defeated the system. The system was, give me just enough lore. Zero lore. Unless you watch all the movies, then they have their own lore. They've made their own lore just by existing for over the course of these movies. And you notice how nobody comes into the damn Gino Toretto verse going, I don't know who these characters are. We talked last couple weeks. I literally have heard couples in front of me in Marvel movies, the 17th, 18th damn Marvel movie go, there's so many characters. How many characters is in here? Nobody says that at Fast and the Furious. They've sidestepped that totally. It's immaculate how they've done it. So that's what I'm saying. I'm telling you, nobody, the number crunchers aren't going to look at that and go, we don't want to make any more of those. That's impossible. It's impossible for them to draw that conclusion. So what the hell is going to be the new Fast and the Furious? What other vehicles, situations, and stuff are going to be in that genre?
Well, that's a really interesting question because you talked about Infinite, and I feel like that's a movie that's trying to take a swing at that sort of thing, right? Trying to take a swing at essentially street clothes superheroes. And the only thing it doesn't get right was apparently the lore. I'm sure it gets other things wrong too. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting way to define a genre, right? Street clothes superheroes with no real backstory. Because frankly, that also kind of defines Mission Impossible.
Yes.
And I'm sure we could pull another one or two. Let me think about that one for a second. I mean, definitely John Wick, right?
Definitely, yes.
There's some lore there, but maybe we're seeing the beginnings of it already. Like, everybody's just
the lore doesn't matter. We just know that he's a badass. That's what the lore is telling us. He's a badass, and he's going to survive anything because he's the Baba Yaga, and that's it.
And there is, I mean, okay. And so if you look at sort of the cross platform of it all, one of the things that you definitely find across YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok is a real appreciation of just flat out human spectacle, right? Essentially stupid human tricks. And what are the greatest stupid human tricks, if not big budget Hollywood stunts? If not, the fight scenes in The Raid, or Tom Cruise hanging off the side of a plane, or, Keanu Reeves fighting guys on motorcycles, whatever it might be.
Dude, but Triple X was too early.
Oh,
Triple X was too early, dog.
Wow.
Or it's a pioneer. Look at it either way you want.
We also talked on another episode on our Patreon about guilty pleasures. And I think Triple X is included in that for me.
Dude, there's a bunch of those, but I think Fast 5 is in that for me. Like, I never watched the Fast movies. I watched some of the one that John Singleton did because John Singleton, and I didn't like that one. I love John Singleton, didn't really like that movie. And then I watched Fast 5 just for no reason on like HBO or something. And I was just like, I get this. I like this. The Rock is the bad guy kind of, and he's chasing them around, and they got, ooh, what's going to happen? And I didn't know any of the lore. And they had some lore in that movie too. They were like saying something about some guy had gotten killed and they were going to avenge him or something. I don't know. I just watched it and I loved it. It was one of the only things I've ever taken my brain out for. And I hate that phrase. People who say that are stupid. If that's part of your regular vocabulary, just shut your brain off. You shut your brain off permanently and stop polluting the earth with your bullshit. Honestly, that's a psycho thing. That's a psycho way to live. But in Fast 5, I got it for 2 seconds why people say stuff like that. Because I just said, I'm not going to try to pick this apart. I'm just going to look at what I'm seeing. And it was all fun and I enjoyed it. So that would go on our Patreon episode for Guilty Pleasures if we had thought of it at the time. So yeah.
Definitely check out the Patreon.
What if the new
people.
genre is just going to be guilty pleasures all combined into one movie and into multiple movies?
Dude, I think you yes, the mouths of Rons. That's right. That's exactly right.
I think we're kind of circling. I mean, we're kind of circling here the idea that like, this next genre is essentially going to be everything you like about superheroes without the complicated explanations, right? Everything you like about, beefcake action 80s action movies without sort of the inherent cheese factor. Everything you like about
good sci-fi.
Yeah, good sci-fi, but without sort of the oppressive sense of doom and gloom, right? Like it's like superhuman dudes in street clothes duking it out under a rainbow colored sky with crazy technology flashing all around. and
Mhm.
and they're going to be all the different colors of the rainbow and their skin tones as well.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, that's
Can I be honest?
And
I want
orientations
to
and all
watch
that.
all that. You just
Dude.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, there's a good indicator that that's probably a good direction then.
that
No,
sounds great.
It's starting to happen, and I wonder who's writing that novel that turns into the Lord of the Rings for that generation.
I
It's
am.
like somebody's penning. I mean, you might be, dude, because you're right. You're in the urban fantasy stuff. I think if we were just going to try to pin down, we started this conversation at one point trying to determine what genre was going to take over or whatever. I would say urban fantasy. If I was gonna nail it down to one thing, urban fantasy, and I would have that start to expand to mean it's
Urban
a
sci-fi.
fantasy that you're in your urban street clothes doing all this crime fighting and stuff and never getting hurt and stuff. You don't necessarily ever have to find the magical druid potion of the whatever the fuck to do what you need to do in that world. You just can because you're John Wick or whatever.
God, what's really interesting about all this too is now you think about some of the movies that are coming out, and like everything that we just said sounds exactly like the movie Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds.
Oh my god, that's so true. It does.
Which by
Which
I don't know that.
see.
What I do too, and I don't know that movie is going to be the thing that kicks off the next great genre boom, but it's at least a data point you can hold up there and take a look at.
Right. Oh, but you know what? Another thing is, and I hate to say this, but that damn Space Jam, dog. Because the new Space Jam,
what a piece of shit, by the way,
dude. I haven't watched it. I have not watched it, so I
couldn't get past the halfway point. It was terrible.
Dude. I refuse to. So you're a better man than me. But in the end, from what I'm hearing, they go to all these different genres and they go to all these different worlds and stuff because they're trying to capitalize off of Warner Brothers IP. So they end up in Mad Max. They end up in whatever else. They probably end up being Batman or something. I don't know. But the bottom line is,
was in it.
Oh, there you go. So the whole point of it is, dude, oh my God, we're going to endure a wave of that if this makes money. We're going to endure a wave of that because it does everything we said. Ready Player One was that as a precursor, right?
Well, what have we been talking about on Reboot It, right? The idea that like the greatest play in the era of streaming services is for these studios to start mashing up all their biggest franchises, where it's like, which basically is saying like, how can we throw the rules out the window and just put all the shit that people like crammed into one product, which is what we're talking about.
Oh my God. So like, there's going to be, some 600-page novel about advertising and like Coke is going to fight Pepsi for the fucking, for the heart of Mountain Dew.
God, I hope not.
I mean, look, please. If you made a very funny cartoon version of that I would watch.
So let me actually take this into a different direction that has been on my mind. I liked where we're going, and maybe it all converges. I think kids entertainment, which really has been off the radar for the past 15, 20 years, is poised to make a huge comeback. And I think you look at something like Space Jam, you look at something like Mitchell's versus the Machines, which was one of the big surprise hits for Netflix this year. You look at everything that we're talking about here, like, all right, how do we take a bunch of franchises that maybe don't have the juice on their own, but we just smash them together into a big, bright thing that people will like? The audience for that is kids. And secondly, if I'm a streaming service and I'm not making the same money that I was in an era where theaters were booming and those TV licensing deals were lucrative, then I know the thing I need is merchandising, and nothing merchandises like kids shows, whether it's TV or movies. So I do force, and especially, and this is the other thing, I came out from the beginning of this year, have been working in animation, and some of the strides that are being made in terms of making animation both cost effective and faster to produce are huge. And so, I wouldn't be surprised to see your sort of big tentpole animated kids movies expanding very rapidly from just the Pixar, the Disney Pixar and DreamWorks duopoly that has been there for, the past 15 years. I think that's a potential cash cow for all these streaming services if they can get it going.
Oh, dude, I think there's going to be definitely a period of all the stuff we're talking about, and like all the kids stuff will be these weird, like prefab animated stuff, like that dudes can do in their garages, like something that some guy animates in his garage or a glorified garage is going to become the biggest thing that all these corporate brands are chasing. So that'll be the stuff for kids. So like Poochie the super dog or whatever that kicks it in a world made of polygons will be the biggest shit in the world, and everybody's going to chase that and do a snake that solves crimes or whatever the fuck. They're gonna do all that shit, but that's going to be for kids. For the middle grade, it's going to be some sort of fantasy, like super diverse fantasy solar punk shit. And the grown-ups will have urban fantasy John Wicks, where at the end of them kicking the shit out of everybody, there'll be a utopia at the end of that. Like they'll be like, I kicked the shit out of everybody and I pushed the button, and now like it'll be the end of Total Recall. Every single one of these action movies will be the end of Total Recall. You shoot everybody, you kill everybody, and at the end you put your hand in the thing and it makes there be air on Mars. Just hyper violent until a beautiful catharsis ending at the end, earning all that violence, because that's what makes you a hero, as you save the world. I think that's going to be the I think it's going to be three quadrants. Poochie, Fast and the Furious Light, and John Wick is going to be like, those are going to be the genres.
And then Apple will be making all those A24 movies, and that's the fourth quadrant for the.
Oh yeah, dude, A24 and Blumhouse doing like they're going to be counter programming the solar punk. So maybe that's one thing I want to talk about as we round this off. We talked about the money making genres, but let's talk about the producible stuff, which is horror. So what are we going to be being scared of as that fourth quadrant of that, sort of family friendly, besides the John Wick urban fantasy stuff? So we got two basically family friendly parts of it, one that isn't family friendly, and then this other thing that's just counter to all that. No hopeful endings, just whatever we're scared of in the new world, the worst things we fear.
I think that one's kind of easier because I think horror is always at its best when it turns the familiar into the terrifying. And I think in a world that's so dominated by sort of superhero narratives, we're kind of seeing it already between Invincible, The Boys, and Brightburn. I think it's that idea of like turning the tropes of superhero genre into horror. Like, how do you take the story of singular individuals with power, or people fighting clandestine wars or whatever, and turn that into something disturbing and gross? I could see that happening.
I could definitely see that happening.
So like a young lady wakes up and discovers that somebody's stolen all her Bitcoin, and she has to like go on the run from a shadowy cabal that turns out to be ghosts. And they call it Ghost in the Machine, the American version.
Yes, it's going to be exactly that, Ed. Yes,
I'll buy that ticket.
Happen. Well,
I'll buy that for $1.
I think Black Mirror. That's what I think a lot of the horror genre is going to go towards, is technological nightmares and things that could happen to ruin your lives through technology, because I think that people are pretty afraid of that, and also it's like happening.
It's funny though, you don't really see that currently in at least in movies, at least in horror movies or horror on television.
No, but I think it'll happen because, I mean, technology's like, what if technology doesn't work right and it just ruins your life?
But you know what I think that doesn't happen? You know what I think that doesn't happen? It's because your technology is laughable in 2 minutes. You come up with a fresh ass movie about how the Betamax VCR ate grandma, VHS already took over that. You come up with a movie about how, mini DV tapes killed your mom. They already got, cameras in people's phones now. It's obsolete as soon as you start doing it. Remember they tried to do that thing, I unfriend you or something. It's like it was like, I think kids almost reject that. Like I've seen kids watch horror movies and make fun of the phones kids had in the movie, because the movie took place 2 years ago, and this motherfucker got a Suzuki Sidekick. That's a car, but he's got a T-Mobile Sidekick, and all of a sudden it's hilarious because that's not the proper phone. You know what I mean? I think that's why that's why we reject those, and they're not as big. Black Mirror should be not a niche show on Netflix that took over the world for a year or two. It should be the status of horror.
Yeah.
but it's not. Because
Mm.
because we're still scared of fucking ghosts and witches. It's 2021, and the scariest thing you can do, way more scary than a guy with a knife in his hand standing in your fucking hallway, is a goddamn witch who you disturbed her bones, and we gotta grind them up and sniff them, or else she'll come and did it. God damn, they love that way more than anything. Home invasion ain't shit because they think they're John Wick and they can beat it up. But a witch, ooh,
I mean, let's be real, Ed. What are you gonna do against a witch?
I'm gonna tear the pieces of paper that she's on because they don't exist. It's so fucking stupid. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna say, I'm sorry they killed you for being a witch just because you was an independent bitch in the 1700s. Or the 1600s. I'm sorry. I'm sorry they did that to you. And I bet you she'd leave me the fuck alone. That's what I would do to a witch.
It sounds like a good idea. Because she's probably not a witch. She's probably just a ghost of a really unhappy person.
You know what I mean? I don't know. That's a personal pet peeve that we don't have more. Because I agree with you, Ron. We should have more technological, scary shit.
Because my point was going to be that, like, right now we're living in a time where Facebook and technology in general has convinced people and spread misinformation on such a scale that it's literally killing people. People are dying from misinformation, and we can't do much about it because of the way this is all set up. Like, it's crazy. It's put the idea of truth being anything important as not real. Like, it's truth is arguable from now on. And while these people sound crazy to us, arguing that what we can see as facts, they're not that crazy, because the information that they are getting inundated with all of the time and is being piled on them and then approved by this person and approved by this person and approved by this person. And eventually they believe this stuff as the truth. And getting people out of that, to me, that is a horror. Like that, if you could turn that into good horror, I think that it would be amazing, because it's happening, and things that are actually happening are scary.
True, but it's also really, really hard to milk entertainment out of that without taking a side that immediately alienates at least half your audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you could. But you know what? What the hell good is liberal Hollywood for? You know,
dude, I say this all the time. I've gotten into arguments with people about this. Liberal Hollywood is such a red herring,
right?
Because yes, the people who work the jobs are artists. They're craftspeople. The majority of them probably are liberals, but like the stories that are being greenlit and the people who control the money are not. And like for every sort of navel gazing indie drama that is legitimately liberal in its morals and its themes, you can't say the same thing about the vast majority of movies that are released by studios. You just absolutely can't. So I would think it would actually be incredibly difficult to try to dramatize, you know, the polarization of society into a workable horror concept, just because it's kind of commercially unviable.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to coalesce an audience around that, because you're getting into the thing that already makes half the people hate the other half the people.
I mean, look, you wouldn't do that exactly like that. The story would be about, you know, a group of people teaming up together because they believe a thing is true, and then that thing is not true. Like,
then they take a pill, or a one color pill or another color pill, and then they
absolutely. And then guess what? People will decide which side is correct. That's the thing that's interesting. Like, to me, like, I think that there's a lot of people would, when you do stuff like this, I think a lot of people will argue that one side is true. Like, people who are conservative use the blue pill thing all the time.
Red pill,
but
that's whatever. But that's what I'm saying. That's part of the horror, though. If somebody was smart enough to like dramatize that, the horror of two trans women make a piece of art that now the alt-right uses and men go their own way movements use to justify all this malfeasance.
Yep.
That is horror. But again, that seems like a book, and nobody reads books anymore. It's the future. Hop in, losers. We're not going to go to the bookstore because they don't exist.
True.
You know, you know what I
True.
mean? So
Can't fight it, man. Can't fight it.
So
It's
yeah,
interesting.
dude, I think that's gonna be the vast way in the future of horror is maybe some of those concepts we're talking about. But I think I'd put $1,000 on witches and goblins and crap still being the scariest thing, or part or supernatural crap in general being big in 50 damn years, which is gonna
It will
blow
be.
my mind if I live that long. I'm gonna be mind blown that we're still that gobsmacked by the dark.
That's all very fair. I will say, though, as you were saying that, Ed, some 23-year-old punk needs to make the Gen Z horror movie about like teenagers feeling the horror of everybody older than them buying into all this polarization, or like being manipulated into this polarization. Who is the 23-year-old who's going to make the Zoomer version of They Live? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's the horror I want to see if we're going to lean into all this stuff.
Yeah, well, that gauntlet has been thrown down by producer Bill. So send all scripts, care of your moms. But yeah, so I mean, I think this has been a really stimulating conversation in regards to like the future. I've never really thought about the future of genre before. I mean, when I was very first trying to hatch this idea or think about this idea, I was thinking, will we have westerns in 50 years? And the answer will be, for some reason, yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It'll
Yeah,
just
there'll
be
be
for
a
some
couple.
reason. You know what I mean? So I think genre as a construct isn't going away, but I think Bill wonderfully struck on it earlier that like, and you know what was a great call by you early in this broadcast? You saying that like the 90s were this playground of like basically the Jurassic Parks. People were trying to do Jurassic Park. Take your 13-year-old and all the other kids, along with your guidance, into this movie that's going to scare the damn bejesus out of them and not bore you to tears.
Mm-hmm.
That was the decade of that. And that's a really good call, because I think that's what led us to kind of understand that, yeah, the action is going to be Fast and the Furious with some Mission Impossible for probably the next 50, 60 years. Plain clothes superheroes, as Bill coined. That's going to be what the teens watch, and the grown-ups are going to watch Baba Yaga's kill and then open up the sky. And then little kids are going to watch, polygonal cartoons,
Yeah.
That's wild. Dude, I'm gonna put this in a time capsule, and we're gonna pop it out if we're right. If we live,
you heard
long
it here
enough.
first, audience. You heard it here first.
This is a time capsule episode, so damn. I hope that some film students are looking at this and being like, "How did these idiots know?" It'd be like in The Good Place when that guy got really high on mushrooms and predicted what the afterlife was to a 60% degree. We're that guy of the future.
Yeah.
I hope maybe that'll be the case.
The next time we do this, we got to get high on mushrooms. That's the only thing.
Oh, yeah, great. That's gonna be my first time doing drugs, is having a weird conversation with you guys. That sounds fantastic.
Ron is gonna trip out. That's the thing.
Dude, he's gonna trip so hard, he's gonna come out and be like, I don't get magic anymore, dude. I don't get magic anymore, dude.
Oh, we'll finally have
what's
done
gonna
it.
happen. I'm gonna think magic is real afterwards, is what's gonna happen.
Well,
Like, I'm no longer an atheist. I am a mage.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of The Greatest Pod. Thank you guys so much who have joined our Patreon. It's super dope. $5 gets you extra pods that we do. $7 gets you art mailed directly to your door in addition to those pods. That's it. That's the pitch. So, and it helps us to do shows like this where we stare at our navels for an hour or so and let you like in on our thought process. I love these shows. I think they're getting more interesting all the time. What say you guys?
I love
These are
them
some of my favorite conversations we have is when we get to just throw down the gauntlet of some weird idea or challenge and explore it from all angles.
Yeah, and maybe some of you miss our old podcast, but I got to be honest with you, I love this new podcast. I love us being able to talk about a larger variety of things and not be limited to just characters. We could bring characters into it, but I love the idea of being able to really explore an idea, which is what we super did this time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Rock
proud
and
of us.
roll. Yeah, I'm proud of us too. So thank you guys for listening to another super dope, super great episode of Ron.
The greatest pod.
Pod.